Thanks for joining us for another edition of Progress and Promise. Our beautiful coastline and what is the best use of it? That's been at the heart of the economic and environmental discussion in the last 14 years I've lived here. We've made great progress in improving the water quality of our area, and now two things have come up that are highlighting the steps we've made so far and the road we want to go down in the future. Both are tied to the BP oil spill of 2010. One is the proposal by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission to build a fishery enhancement center, a hatchery, on Bruce Beach west of the Community Maritime Park site in downtown. Funding for that project, which was made official late last year, comes from money provided by the oil giant to restore the ecology and environment in communities damaged by the spill following the Deepwater Horizon. But as the project has come closer to fruition, questions have been raised about the hatchery and whether it is the best fit not only for the local habitat, but also for the vision of our renaissance of downtown. The other is the Restore Act. Locally, we have advisory committees assembled to vet projects proposed for funding through the Restore Act process. And it's a good thing, too, because the Restore money could total millions of dollars, a sum this community is not likely to see for decades to come. Joining me today to discuss these topics are executive producer Quint Studer, who we're always happy to have with us, and Christian Wagley. Christian, can you tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. I actually grew up in Maryland, came to graduate school at the University of West Florida back in 1994 to study biology and coastal studies, and been sticking around here at the Panhandle ever since, working on green building, environmental issues, and have really, I guess, become an advocate in the community as much as anything for environmental issues and creating a walkable, bike-friendly city as well. So.
Well, great, and we are so happy that you are doing all that wonderful work for our downtown. One of something you left off your resume, but that is equally impressive, is that you are a member of this Restore Committee. Can you tell the folks some about what y'all are doing and how that is supposed to work? Because people hear the BP money, and it sounds like a great big pot of gold out there at the end of the rainbow, but it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, it gets confusing because there's so many different pots of BP money moving around, but the Restore money is really the big one. Mm-hmm. It's going to be between $5 and $20 billion total. And the amount of that comes to Escambia County is going to be between $100 and $150 million. And so I'm fond of saying, as are many, that from tragedy can come opportunity. And I think that's what we can look at here with the Restore money that's coming back to our area. The committee that I'm on is there are 9 members working on the best uses of that money for Escambia County. And like I said, we don't even know how much that money is going to be yet, so we're a little bit ahead of the game. But we've been following our process very much like what the Urban Redevelopment Committee went through in the city in terms of hearing from experts, hearing from the community, taking our time, and really trying to get it right. And so the major decisions yet on how to use the money haven't even been made yet. But.
Tell us some about who the other members of your committee, the Restore Committee, are, because they did try to get a real cross-section of folks so that it's not representative of only one kind of interest.
Sure. You know, the city had an appointee. That's been Tina Terry from Gulf Power, who's actually the chair, and she runs a very good meeting, very sharp, very capable, and showing great leadership with that. There are a couple of people with transportation expertise, business expertise, governmental expertise. I don't know if you want me to name them all. There's 9 people, so.
No, I think just what we want to convey is that that's not, we want to hear from a lot of different voices. It's not just an environmental group or just a government group.
Right, it's very broad, and what we've done through our process is we've invited a number of different people to come and kind of testify before us, because I think it's important to know, if you're going to try to decide how to spend the money, you need to know what the deficiencies are in the community first. What are the issues and the things that need to be corrected? And I think we've done a very good job of getting people from the universities, from economic development, from environmental side of things, some of the traditionally disadvantaged communities to come before us. And so I think hopefully everybody feels really good so far about the process we've followed. So it's mainly been that information collection so far, and now in the first part of this new year, we'll start getting down to starting to I guess to prioritize where we think the money should be spent. But we're just getting to that point now.
What are some of the themes? I know it's early, but you said you've taken a ton of public input, which is extremely important in this process. What are some of, like a couple, 3 of the themes that are emerging in terms of what the areas are that we need to address?
Yeah, I would say some of the communities that have really come forward and spoken very strongly about some of these deficiencies in the community and where things need to be corrected. One is actually the disabled communities, looking at so many deficiencies in our existing infrastructure where people cannot safely walk, get a wheelchair through. Just the facilities are not accessible, and even something as simple as the beach, where somebody, I mean, there's a woman that's come to a lot of our meetings who talks about about how she has never touched the Gulf of Mexico because she can't get, there's literally no easy way for her to get down to the water's edge. And so there are these needs in the community, and that's certainly an idea of a project that could be done to help to correct these deficiencies throughout our public infrastructure. But the disabled community has been very well represented and has spoken very strongly about these needs. The environmental community as well, which would certainly make sense because I think first and foremost this really was an environmental disaster that then became an economic disaster and a community disaster as well. They've spoken very strongly about not only fixing the damage from the spill, but the damage we've had in this area that goes back many years in terms of our bays, especially in our water quality. And I guess overall, a lot of the disadvantaged and older neighborhoods, a lot of the older in-town neighborhoods that traditionally have been left behind as Americans moved, and we did it in Pensacola as well. We got in our automobiles and we sprawled out and we moved out to the edge of town and we left behind these neighborhoods to decay. Places like Belmont de Villiers or Brownsville or any number of those older neighborhoods like that. The folks from those neighborhoods have really participated and come to our meetings and spoken very eloquently about the need to, I guess that basic idea that you fix what's broken before you go out and build new things.
Something new.
Right.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Christian, when we look at organizations we work with, my company, we always find if you have a decision matrix before the issue is there. Because once the issue comes, the emotions get involved. So when you look at prioritization, for example, we always like to say, is this how is it weighted? What type of metrics or what type of matrix are you using to prioritize? Is there a process you're using?
We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
We're actually hiring a consultant to kind of help us through that process here early in the new year. Like I said, mostly so far now we've just kind of gotten all the information, and now we need to start getting those ideas down.
Well, because that takes the emotion out of it. And once a project hits the floor, then the emotion takes over. If you have a weighted system, how things are going to be weighted, such as disadvantage, such as handicapped, those things are, if they're weighted higher, then when those organizations come out on top, or investment in certain local projects, I think that just makes it easier. What about the court case? Isn't there a court case going on still with this?
That's right. I mean, the money that's going to come back to our area is still in litigation. I mean, that case is the case against BP. This is for Clean Water Act fines, and that case is in New Orleans, and it'll start up for a while, and they'll go, and then they'll shut down for a while. But the numbers they talk about between $5 and $20 billion again, and so again, we're already planning for it. We're ahead of the game, but the money's not here yet. So.
But it's not a matter of, I think, if you're going to get money, it's probably the amount of money. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, the money's definitely coming. And the local pot is only one part of the restore equation. There's a state pot of money as well. There's a pot that's kind of over the whole Gulf of Mexico for larger ecological restoration. There's a lot of money flowing there, which can be, opportunity. There's also can be great peril in that as well in terms of what you choose to do. But.
Well, what I've heard is this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for people in this community, and I think it's important to have a group like yourself that's, independent, diverse, that can make these decisions, because I think that's what will lead to better decision-making.
Yeah, I think you've got to ultimately have the people's trust, and I think we've done a very good job of, for example, early in the process, we moved our meetings to the board chambers downtown, the Board of County Commissioners chambers, so the meetings could all be televised.
Absolutely.
So that everybody, because there are a lot of people that can't come to the meetings, and they can watch them. We also, there was talk about having meetings in the morning. We moved them, and they've all been at 4 o'clock in the afternoon now, which a lot of times people can leave work and come. Much more accessible than if we had them at 10 a.m.
Do you have a schedule of meetings or a place that folks can go to kind of find out more about the process and come and watch the meetings or participate if they want to?
Sure, yeah. We meet the first Monday of every month at 4 p.m. in that Escambia County Board of County Commissioners chambers down there on Palafox Street. If you go to the county website, there's a page for Restore. Probably the easiest thing is just to go and type Restore in the search part there, and then you can read every single document that we read, minutes of every meeting, videos of every meeting, if you really want to get into it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. If you stick around with us, we have yet another topic to go into, so we're going to take a wee break, and we'll be back in a second. Thank you so much for sticking around. We are moving on to another hot topic in the community right now, which is the proposed fish hatchery downtown at Bruce Beach, west of the Community Maritime Park site. And Christian is kind enough to share his expertise with us about that as well. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I know that you were a member of the URAC committee, which tried to take a a broad look at the future of downtown and what kind of vision we wanted to have in that. And while the committee didn't take a position on the hatchery project at the time, y'all did talk about it some. What was the consensus?
Yeah, we didn't take a formal position. We did discuss it, and we had a lot of concerns about whether that was the best thing that needed to happen in that area there. Our URAC report, our final report, actually shows that area of Bruce Beach more for passive recreation, access to the water. The idea being that in the future, you're going to have more intensive residential development around that, and you need to do everything you can to maintain that open space and that access to the water, and that was kind of our idea.
And that led you into some research about hatcheries all over the country and kind of what their legacy and their impact is. So what can you share about what you've found out?
Yeah, when this project first came forward, I guess it was really June in 2011, and I had a lot of concerns about it, but like anything, I thought, well, I've got to go out and make sure I'm as well informed as I can be. So myself, along with several others in the community who have some science background, started doing that. And it is absolutely amazing what I have found by looking into the experience with marine fish hatcheries and other communities. I think it's like anything. If you're gonna build something in your community, the logical thing is to say, well, where else have they done it, and did it work there or not? I mean, that's a pretty logical thing to do. So I've done that and looked at the hatcheries in the Pacific Northwest and in Alaska and California and Texas. These are all places that have been looked at that are doing something similar to what we're trying to do here with our hatchery, and it is absolutely amazing the difference between the public's perception of the hatcheries, which everybody kind of thinks that they've been incredibly successful and they've had a huge hand in rebuilding fish populations in these areas, especially fish that are popular among recreational fishermen. That's what they've really been working toward. So you have the public perception, which tends to be way up here, and then you actually start reading the scientific journal articles and the papers and the reports from scientists, which nobody really likes to read, but that is my background, so I can read that stuff and can actually digest it and understand it. And the difference between the two is night and day. You'll see newspaper articles and magazine articles touting the success of these programs, and then you'll read the science, and the scientists will say, either it's not working or we don't know if it's working, we can't tell if it's working, and this is after decades of it and tens of millions of dollars spent and hundreds of millions of fish released. They're still not really sure, and I think part of the reason is you run up against the basic rules of ecology, and like I say, like to say, those are rules that they bend but they don't break, and so there's some real fundamental issues out there that make me question the viability of what we're talking about here locally.
I know that some of the science indicates that hatchery fish are not as healthy once released into the wild as the wild stock. They have genetic problems, and there have been problems with them being unable to mate with their wild counterparts, so that it artificially inflates the fish population.
Yeah, it's been well documented for many, many decades that the hatchery-raised fish are less fit. They're less genetically less fit. And in nature, see, nature always works toward making a better product. Through evolution, it's always better, and those are the ones that pass on their genes. The hatchery kind of does the opposite, and so the fish tend to be less fit and less able to reproduce in the future. So you run into this bizarre thing where the more hatchery fish you put out there, the more you actually reduce the ability of the population at large to reproduce. So it's kind of the opposite of what happens in nature, and you really end up creating an inferior product, which is a very interesting problem.
There have also been some questions about the location and if that is the best, highest use of that property.
Yeah, I think my confusion on this whole project is not much about fish hatchery good or bad. It's process. It seems inconsistent at best. I know at the Y, and I had a dog in that hunt, in the Y on Site 8, which was going to have complete water access, pay $1 million every 10 years into the city, and create a lot of jobs. And pretty environmentally sound for 1 acre. People wanted best use. They didn't want to put anything there that would hurt the future. We did studies. We hired the city hired a real estate company, the mayor did, to look into it. And they came out, and as you know, we're going to end up, the Y's going to be on another site. Yet this is now 6 acres, pretty much right across for $1, 6 acres, probably limited waterfront access for 8 to 12 jobs. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just a big believer that there should be a consistent process followed for all projects. And it caught my eye when the URAC was doing their study, because I heard from various members concern looking at all that study, all that brain power into what Bruce Beach should be used for. And it's like, that's just thrown out right now for $1 for 6 acres for 8 to 12 jobs. And I just found it inconsistent with what's happened across the street or across the bay.
And I'm hearing that concern more and more around the community. It is hard for the average person to get a handle around the science and the things that I've looked into, but it's a little easier, and I think that ultimately that may be the issue that decides it one way or the other in our community, at least for that spot. Is that the right space? What does that do to the larger dynamic of downtown? And are we following a deliberate process in the way we consider these issues?
And it really is an industrial use, the fish hatchery.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to make it a little less of that than it's been in the past and make it a little more of a public access thing. I don't know truly how much it's going to be, but it is largely an industrial operation. Its intent is to produce fish more than it is any other single thing.
Yeah,
sure.
so my question wasn't good or bad. I think the fish hatchery needs to be looked at. Mine is just one of inconsistency with process.
And that's true. And you know, the people are watching this sort of thing, and people want to see a consistent process applied so that they feel like everything gets a fair shake. And it's not that you, beat an issue to death or you discuss it unnecessarily, but everything deserves to be fully discussed and fully vetted.
If you're going to do RFP for one piece of property, do it for other pieces of property. If you're going to assess it from a real estate perspective on one piece of property, then do the other piece of property. And then if it comes out that the best use is a fish hatchery, bless it and let's all get behind it.
Sure. And I think in the larger context of the BP monies that are coming to our area, this is the first of much, many hundreds of millions of dollars that are coming. And so it's important to get it right. Everybody's watching. We're watching locally. The nation is watching. Can we trust the people of the Gulf Coast to get it right? This money was supposed to go back to the federal government, and Congress stepped in and said, no, we want most of those funds to go back to those Gulf Coast states. So people are watching and making sure that we can get it right and do it right.
Well, the conversation that we're having today is part of what I think can help us get it right, because we can't come to the right solution unless we ask the right questions and we look into all the avenues. So thank you so much for coming and having a chat with us. If you hang on with us for just a minute, we're going to take a short break and be right back.
Well, welcome back. One of the things we'd like to do is go back to the hatchery a little bit. And like I said, there's really, to me, 2 points. One is the process. Is the process for the city going to be equal, consistent? As someone who's invested lots of money in downtown, you want to know you're working with people that there's a consistent process that's equal to all, whether it's a CMPA site or now Bruce Beach. That came up at Maritime Park when we said, why don't you do an RFP for Bruce Beach? And that was like 8 years ago, and now we're back because that wasn't done to Bruce Beach. So that's one topic, the fairness of the process, best and brightest use, no property taxes, because the why we heard no property tax, so the hatchery isn't either. But that's one point. But the other one is just like you said, I'd like you to dig into perception reality, because when I first hear the word fish hatchery, sort of it excites me. I'm thinking these fish, I'm seeing them swimming, I'm seeing them going into the water, I'm seeing people come and fish, and so I'm not sure, because it's my own perception when I first heard it. So what is that gap that you've talked about?
Well, and that's the perception that most everybody has. I mean, how can you not breed fish and release them and there end up being more fish? Of course there's going to be more fish, and that's part of what's perpetuated and strung it along for so many years. But again, you run up against the forces of nature, and I think anybody who has kept a fish bowl, let's say a little goldfish bowl at home, gets this. And that's, that little bowl maybe holds 2 fish. You can dump 5 more fish in there, and they may live a day, they may live 2 days, but eventually they're going to perish, and you're back to the original 2 fish. The environment has a limit, and it can only support so many fish, and that's part of what they found is when only in recent years have they actually gone back. They would release fish for all these years, but they never went back and counted to see how many would survive. But as soon as you release fish into the environment, the mortality rates are tremendous. They get eaten, they're competing with the wild fish that are already there, they die of starvation, disease. I mean, they're all competing out there. So you end up with few of those fish that you released end up surviving. And so now they're going back and counting, and indeed, they're not finding that many of those hatchery fish. And then the ultimate question that bedevils the whole thing that they really can't figure out is that, again, the environment determines how many fish there can be, not how many fish you dump in there. And the environment will bring that number back down again to what it can support. So you've got hatchery fish being released on top of wild fish, and in the end, some of the wild fish may just push aside some of the hatchery fish may push aside the wild fish, and in the end, you don't end up with any more fish at all. They call it replacement. You literally replace the wild fish with the hatchery fish. That's the one the scientists still can't figure out for sure if it's working or not because of that.
And again, it comes back to, if there is a good idea for a fish hatchery, is there a better location? Just like the Y ended up moving to PNJ and Old Site, and now is Bruce Beach, is that the best use for something to attract residential, attract investment to the East UA? And I guess that's what good conversation leads to, good thought leadership.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Talk some about the health of the Pensacola Bay watershed, because some of the water quality testing that's done, particularly by the health department and reported to the EPA, does show improvement because it was so awful to begin with. So yeah, there is some improvement, but there are some different issues related to how the fish will survive that you have pointed out.
Yeah, certainly our bays have improved. When they really bottomed out in the early 70s, and when the Clean Water Act kicked in, they've improved some since then. But the real critical thing for fish, and the real critical overall indicator of the health of our waterways, is the presence of seagrass. This is the submerged grass that grows attached to the bottom. Right. You see it in shallow water. It's not the stuff that sticks up above the water. And the only place you really see it anymore around here is along Gulf Breeze and close to the Pensacola Pass. 90 to 95% of it is gone from our bays, what was there historically. That's prime fish habitat. An acre of that seagrass supports 50 or up to 50,000 fish, or 500 million invertebrates, all the little shrimp and crabs and everything else in there. And anybody who's been out on a boat knows that. You get into a grass bed and you see fish everywhere. You get in a sandy area, you hardly ever see much of anything. And so that's the critical habitat that is missing from our bays. It's also a larger overall indicator of the health of our bays. And even though our water has improved some, without that seagrass, it's really not a healthy bay. And our bays here are some of the worst, most degraded in the entire state of Florida, unfortunately. And most people don't know that.
And there has been some discussion that at the Enhancement Center they will do some research and growing of seagrasses. Is that something that gives you some more confidence in the process?
Yeah, I know. I haven't heard. I'm not sure about the actual seagrasses. I know they've talked about from the beginning transplanting and digging up some marsh plants that are going to be in that wetland treatment area. And I think that's a very small amount, and that's really not the plants that are missing here. We need those seagrasses. If indeed they're going to grow seagrasses, the submerged grasses here, then that would certainly be a plus that would add to the hatchery.
Okay.
Christian, we thank you not only for today, but your URAC study, the Restore Committee, and I know having been downtown, what you bring to the downtown and pushing for walkability bikes. I mean, you're a Renaissance man, and we're lucky to have you here in Pensacola.
Well, we're lucky to have you, but thank you very much for that. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you all so much. One of the first things I fell in love with when I came here in 1999 was the water. The emerald waters of the Gulf of Mexico, sailing in Pensacola Bay, the way the drive home was enhanced by a detour up Scenic Highway to see the sun bounce off Escambia Bay. Most of all, I love the bayous and the stories people told about them. The stories of fishing and swimming, water skiing, and dolphin spotting helped me learn how deeply woven into the fabric of life the water is here. Those stories made me sad too, because nearly everyone who told me one of those stories told me they couldn't really do that stuff anymore. Years of pollution and neglect, purposeful and benign, had degraded the water quality in those bodies so that the fun people had in them was mostly a memory. Slowly, that has changed. The city passed a stormwater ordinance that creates a funding stream to battle the main culprit of pollution, runoff. Two things are clear from the data about water quality tests on the Pensacola Bay system between 2003 and 2013. It is improving, and it still has a long way to go. In 2003, 42% of the water quality tests done exceeded the federal guidelines for safety. 10 years later, 29% of those tests exceeded the federal guidelines. But a little better than 1 in 3 is not really the ratio that's good enough. Not for a community like this one, which lives and dies by the water. The coast is what draws people here, enchants them and makes them want to return. It is the way many of us make a living, and it's what makes living here special to all of us. The proposed Fishery Enhancement Center at Bruce Beach was one of the first big projects to be funded in Florida with BP money. Money intended to make amends for the environmental damage the 2010 spill caused. In 2011, the City Council unanimously approved entering into negotiations for the project And just a few weeks ago, the $19 million officially came through. In the meantime, questions have arisen about the project. Is a lease of $1 a year too little for such a valuable piece of downtown real estate? Surely we could sell it for more money than that to that long line of developers who are beating down the door to buy those vacant parcels at the Community Maritime Park and the Main Street Sewer Plant site, and the Pensacola Technology Campus, and the old Blunt School site, and the Vernon McDaniel building on Garden Street, and well, you get the picture. Are the 12 or so jobs the facility is projected to create enough to justify the deal? Is the research and education aspect of the proposal an enhancement to the mission or an add-on at the late hour to make it more palatable as an environmental project? Is the habitat of Pensacola Bay healthy enough to sustain these hatchery fish, which have a mixed legacy once they're introduced into the wild? At a recent press conference, City Administrator Colleen Castile elaborated on the project, noting that seagrasses will be grown at the center and adding to the habitat restoration effort. Mayor Ashton Hayward touted it as a way to bring research into the fold as a feature of our waterfront. I love that these questions are being asked because it shows we care. It shows that after decades of taking whatever industry we could get, no matter the impact on the environment or our quality of life, we want to think critically about what will become of our coastline. It shows that after the investment we put into our living shoreline efforts and Project Green Shores, we want to think carefully about expanding that spirit west along the shoreline. The questions show we recognize the valuable asset that is our coastline and that we don't want to repeat the sins of the ecological past. Thanks again for joining us. You can take part in the conversation at progresspromise.com, on our Facebook page, and Our Progress Now on Twitter. We'll see you next time.